Hello, welcome to Balkan Tactics. My name is Dale and this is my run through of the second game in my first ever RTT win. So prior to this game I hadn't actually beaten Admech before. I'd played them a few times, and also looking at the list, I thought this was going to be pretty difficult because it had a lot of units similar to me. Although previously when I have played Admech, they used a different detachment, whereas Baz, my opponent, was using Radzone Corps. So Radzone Corps does some weird battle shock and mortal wound damage. It's almost like they bombard you in your deployment zone. So I started to deploy in my pretty usual way. So I had a blob of cultists ready to take those central objectives, or at least contest them. One which I'm just deploying now on the left, ready to contest that objective on the left. And I'd popped a Rhino in the centre with Cypher, and I believe my two chosen units, again ready to support in the centre. And then this is my third unit of accursed cultists. So the mission setup was hidden supplies and taking hold. So it's basically taken hold with an additional objective in the centre. So I actually deployed 2 lots of cultists on my home field objective. The reason for this was I was worried about the mortal wound damage that his army rule could do, so I didn't want to lose those cultists and then allow him to bring anything in or take my home objective. I placed 1 unit Legionnaires in that building also. I had in reserve my Rhino with my 2 units of Legionnaires, and then I placed my third Rhino on that left hand side, ready to try to contest the objectives on the left as well. We then did the roll off, which I lost, so that meant I went second, which I'm always happy to go second. So what's going on now, the way that Baz explained this to me was I could either take the mortal wounds or take a battle shock. If I took the battle shock, the mortal wounds came on a 5+. If I didn't take the battle shock, the mortal wounds came on a 3+. And then in every one of Baz's command phase, you'd do something similar again, but I didn't get the option to take battle shock. So I actually chose to take battle shock on a lot of my units, which may have been a bit of a mistake because they would have been battle shocked for the whole turn. I assumed it was up until my command phase, which would mean that they wouldn't be able to do any first turn actions for me. But luckily I didn't have that many units that were actually battle shocked, and also the units in the transports were not battle shocked. Baz drew engage on all fronts and overwhelming force to start with. So he starts to move up his units. I'm a little bit worried about those cataphracti destroyers, I believe they are. The guys on the right hand side, there's 6 of them just come around the building next to the walker. Those guys I've played before, and with 1 weapon loadout they can really decimate even a squad of my accursed cultists in one shot. We've started the game on 10 points each. That's because both of our armies are painted. So in tournament play, as long as you have 3 colours on your miniatures and a base, they count as battle ready, which means you will get your painted bonus. So Baz was quite cagey to start with, keeping lots of his units behind cover, but he did move his flying guys in that bottom right corner in order to score engage on all fronts 2 points, and he got his Rustalkers, I believe they are, onto the objective. So in my first turn I drew overwhelming force and containment. Containment should have been fairly easy. Overwhelming force would have been very difficult at this stage, especially because I have not got much shooting. I redrew it and actually drew out Storm Hostile Objective, which is just as difficult. I had 1 chance, a bit of a long bomb, at trying to get to that objective, which did not actually pay off. So I'm just trying to move up my units there for a bit of a long bomb charge. I believe it was a unit of chosen, might have been Legionnaires. I think it's actually chosen because I don't think the Legionnaires were over there. And then I actually made a huge mistake and forgot to go for containment. I moved a unit of legionnaires up there just to try and bait him out a little bit. And then I moved my accursed cultist up there ready to countercharge if he did take the bait. I still had my rhino there. I could have easily moved up a unit of cultists maybe, or use those legionnaires to score containment, but like I said, I forgot completely. That would have been a nice 6 points to start off. Cypher comes out so he can give his 12-inch aura on those central objectives, which actually comes in really handy in this game. And then I moved up my legionnaires there just so that they could be close to the centre to help out if I needed them for any actions. So at this point, I in the top left I started measuring up for potential charge because I thought I could use 1 CP for advance and charge, but then I realised it's only on if the enemy is on objectives, so I ruled that out, and it was a bit of a long charge anyway. So I measured up the charge here. I think it was about maybe 9 inches. Rolled the charge and promptly failed it, which meant I scored absolutely 0 on my first turn. And this is me looking around to see if I could have achieved containment, which I could not. So yeah, big mistake, turn 1 for me. So going into turn 2, Baz draws area denial and containment. So area denial should be fairly simple, and then containment's pretty easy for him because he's already got units in place along the flanks. So due to me having a very cagey turn 1, not really committing many forces and just setting myself up for the counter charge, after a little bit of deliberation, Baz started to move his troops out. He wasn't really sure what he wanted to do because, in his own words, he said this was one of the most cagey games he'd played, which it was normally. I come charging out, but I couldn't with the amount of shooting that this AdMech army had. He started to move up some of his units to take out those legionnaires on the top left, and then moved a lot of his units there to take out that squad of Chosen on the bottom right. His walker, I'm not sure what it's called, I have no idea, but the walker in the middle was there to take area denial. The only snag was the accursed cultists were just within range, so he only managed to get the 2 points for area denial, and it would have been very difficult for him to try and clear that whole squad to achieve max points. He did move up some of his troops, but not all of them, again not wanting to overcommit early on. But he did manage to take, I think, 3 guys from each of my squads, my legionnaires in the top left and Chosen in the bottom right. He then charged both of them and managed to wipe out both of them in combat. Baz then consolidates those rustalkers back onto the objective before taking out my legionnaires in the top left-hand corner. So AdMech have an interesting attachment rule, I think it is, or army rule. Must be the army rule. So interesting army rule where you can choose a doctrine, almost like Space Marines. There's one where you get, I think, heavy on all your weapons and +1 to hit for shooting. And then there's one which hurts me, where it's -1 to hit in close combat. That one really hurts me. Baz was switching between doctrines, or if it was me, I would have stuck to the -1 to hit in combat due to virtually my whole army being a combat force. So in my turn, I drew behind enemy lines and I'd kept containment. Excuse my head here. But containment should have been easy. Behind enemy lines, I had to bin, as it was virtually impossible to get anything behind enemy lines at this stage. And then I drew marked for death, which was also extremely difficult, which I knew I wasn't get. So again, hadn't really had much luck with my draws, partly my mistake as well. Baz was, at this point, he'd scored area denial and also containment. He also scored 10 on the primary for controlling 2 objectives, which gave him a handsome lead of 30 to my 10. So I did really need to score at this point. I did score 5 points for my home objective, which was actually, I believe it was stickied at this point from those cultists and not being battle shocked. So as I was moving up my units, the cataphracti breachers or destroyers or whatever they're called, overwatched on my accursed cultist blob on the right, where I've just taken the casualties from, doing some damage but not too much. I was still confident that I could charge that unit and destroy them. I declared my once per game ability with that unit, so I'd get advanced charge and +1 to hit, +1 to wound. The same said for that central unit, which I was hoping to try and take out that vehicle, that walker in the middle, by charging with the +1 to hit, +1 to wound. Again, with lethal hits, I felt confident that I could take out that vehicle or severely damage it. Over here in the left, I brought out these cultists, but because it was an easy charge, I didn't feel like I needed to use the my once per game ability, which I'd save for later. I also felt like I had enough to kill that one squad of, I think it was 5 dudes. Moved the rhino up to there. I believe that was for containment. Down at the bottom, I moved a unit of cultists, so they could score me containment as well. I had a little reposition with those cultists because I was going on where the central point seemed to be, but it was a little bit off, so I just jiggled those cultists. I moved up my other unit of cultists there by Cypher so that they could do any actions that needed in the middle. I moved up those legionnaires just to try and help out in the centre, and I thought about moving up the legionnaires, thought they're just going to get shot off the board, so I thought I'll keep them in cover and move that rhino up there so I could potentially drop the last unit of chosen out of that rhino and contest either the far right or either of the central objectives with the big advance and charge and the +3 they get from disembarking from a transport. I then did some highly ineffective shooting, not really doing much damage, then rolled for some charges. I managed to make all 4, so looking good. Big charge, I was confident I could kill all the units, so made the one in the bottom right with the chosen, I think it was, or legionnaires. I think it's my second unit chosen actually. I think they had come out of that rhino. Charge down there. Then I made this big charge here to try and take out those cataphracti destroyers or whatever they're called. Charge this vehicle in the middle to try and clear the centre. And then I also made the charge in the top left. So I knew that Baz had 2 CP so that he could use a stratagem to interrupt. Its actual name is counter-offensive, and it means that after you fight with a unit, your opponent can then interrupt and fight with one of their units. So there were 3 combats going on. The accursed in the top left, I was confident that they would be fine. The accursed in the middle, I was confident that they would be fine. So I thought the obvious combat is in the bottom right with those chosen attacking the rust stalkers. They can be nasty. I completely forgot about the 3rd unit of accursed cultists, which had charged into the cataphracti breachers, which I should have fought with them first because that's an obvious unit to use counter-offensive on. So I did manage to kill the rust stalkers on that bottom right objective, but made a massive error in the top right. So Baz was able to use counter-offensive with those and almost wiped out my unit. So as I'd lost most of my little guys from the Overwatch earlier, I actually lost 5 of the big guys. I didn't do much damage to the vehicle, but that one guy and the 5 guys from the Dark Commune actually did a lot of work. It was a combination of good rolls from me and a lot of misfortune from Baz here. He lost, I think, all the squad except from 2, which was crazy, really, considering I made such a huge error. It didn't actually punish me that much, which I was grateful for. We had a little bit of a discussion about my consolidating. I think I pushed them a little bit too far. I was potentially planning on consolidating into those the walkers, but I realised that was probably a bad idea anyway. So at the end of my turn, I made score containment for 6 points, but could not score mark for death, so I binned that for an additional CP, which puts the score 30 to Baz and 21 to me. So turn 3 for Baz, he drew no prisoners and marked for death. Again, mark for death was going to be difficult, so he binned that, and he drew extend battle lines. So 2 nice cards there, nice secondary missions to draw. So at this point, I felt like I did a bit of a gotcha moment on Baz, which was completely unintentional. I had explained all my stratagems at the start of the game, as you do, but most of the time you can't take in all that information. And one of my stratagems that Renegade Raiders has is at the end of any fight phase, a unit, infantry or mounted, can either fall back if they're in combat, or if they have fought that turn but are no longer in combat, then they can just move their normal movement, so 6 inches or 12. And then Baz had asked me if I had any fallback and charge stratagems, which I answered no, not really putting 2 and 2 together, not really explaining that I could do that stratagem, and it comes back later when I do that stratagem at the end of this turn, but we'll get back to that when it comes up. So Baz now starts to move out most of his units to try and press home his advantage. Again, he's got to score no prisoners, and he's got to get extend battle lines, so he needs to hold some objectives. That objective for me on the left is pretty comfortable, unless he can shoot me off, because I've got a whole unit of accursed cultists there. In the middle, it's pretty tight contested, and then Baz has control of that bottom right. So what I do now is I look for a space to rapid ingress my Rhino, which has 2 units of Legionnaires. I like to usually drop this in the backfield in turn 3 onto my opponent's home field objective. This because I can only come in reserves into your opponent's deployment zone on turn 3. But in this case, he'd screen me out, so I could not do that. I could not get them down that right-hand side, so I had to settle for putting them pretty much in my deployment to try and contest that right-hand objective. So a few things happening here. First of all, Baz destroys my Rhino in that left-hand side. So the Legionnaires, or Chosen, I can't remember, I think it's Chosen, come out behind the building in cover as best I can. Rhino's destroyed. I then take 1 casualty on my accursed cult, and they decide to surge move into those walkers, try and get out of the firing line into a bit of cover, and then hopefully they can surge into combat with those walkers. I then use 1 CP on that bottom right hand side unit of Chosen to try to save them from the shooting, to force Baz to potentially have to charge them, or just keep them on that objective for a little bit longer, which actually pays off because I do not lose the entire squad. Those flying guys do a little bit of fire and fade. Lots of Baz's shooting is not as effective as it probably should be here. So Baz wipes out that bottom middle unit of cultists, and then takes out a big chunk of those Legionnaires, which it turns out were not actually that well positioned because they weren't in cover. So yeah, that was a little minor mistake there from me. So Baz is able to finish off the bottom right unit of Chosen, which leaves that objective uncontested. He then shoots into my accursed cultists, which means that I can use their ability Howling Horde. This is an ability where the unit can move d6 inches towards the closest enemy unit. It can also end up in engagement range, kind of like what berserkers get for world eaters. It's very annoying to deal with, because if you shoot them, which is their main weakness, they can pile into your unit and then they will get to fight before you in that turn, because I get to select them before you because it's my opponent's turn. So in combat, Baz's walkers managed to kill that remaining unit of accursed in the top right. Then my accursed cultists who fought before the walkers up there, they were the shooty walkers, and the ones on the right were the close combat ones. I cannot remember the names, apologies. But my accursed unit managed to kill 2 and wound the 3rd one. In the middle was a bit of a stalemate. I think Baz didn't do any damage to me, but I managed to maybe chip a couple of wounds off the walker in the middle. And then this is where I did my accidental gotcha. So use my CP, end of the fight phase, can move that unit 6 inches at combat in order to charge Belarus Cowl and that unit of battle line that Baz had moved out. I had a little bit of discussion. He was happy with it. He said he wouldn't really have done much differently, but I do feel he would have been a bit more cautious if he had realised that I could have done that. So that's my bad really there. But Baz didn't really seem to think it would have changed his plan, so we just rolled with it. So Baz managed to score 5 points on his home objective, 5 points for no prisoners, and 5 points for extend battle lines. So turn 3, crunch time, 45-21, which is not a good position to be in. I did score 10 from my primary. I drew area denial and bring it down. I binned area denial, and also drew defend stronghold. So bring it down, I had to take that vehicle out in the middle. I could have potentially taken out the vehicles on the left hand side. Also had Cal as a vehicle, so that one was okay. And then defend stronghold, I was pretty confident that I could keep hold of that. So in the movement phase, I moved my legionnaires out of that rhino in the bottom middle of the board, moved them out, and then I moved up the rhino to try and contest for that objective again, as I didn't want Baz having total control over that, so I had to try and harry him on that objective, potentially take it off him. I had 2 stragglers, cultists there, which I moved up just in case they were useful for secondaries. Moved the rhino up into a better position. Those legionnaires I moved out again, and that squad of cultists I moved up there just to try and keep Cypher a little bit safe in there, because he's still doing a valuable job giving out that 12-inch aura. I moved those chosen up to there, ready for potentially a charge to support in the middle, but there was at least behind a little bit of cover there. The accursed cultists moved up just into a better position, ready to charge into that unit there. Also, battle line from AdMech can do something where they give you -1 OC, so I had to get rid of them because they would have stopped me from controlling objectives, so I needed to remove that battle line. So at this point, Baz uses Overwatch with his unit of flying dudes with the flamers, but surprisingly they do very little damage. So that now means I can use my surge move, D6. I could potentially put them into those troops, but if I do, that means that Baz will get to fight before me, potentially because I will not charge them, so I didn't actually put them in. So over the 3 games, I will be saying about how ineffective my shooting is in this list, but right now my rhino and my legionnaires actually did some real work here. They actually removed that squad pretty much in the bottom right corner. As you'll see, Baz will start to take them away, which I was actually very, very surprised about. So even if you've only got a little bit of shooting, a little bit of melee, it's always good to do it because you might roll well and do something unexpected. I then measured up for the charges. Legionnaires made that charge, which was brilliant because now I could try and again contest that objective. My chosen that were so they moved out to charge into the bird guys. Sorry, they charged into the bird guys. The Legionnaires charged into the vehicle just to try and give it -1 to shoot and stop it from moving around and also tie to that objective. The accursed cultist charged into that battle line squad but did not want Cal being involved in that combat at all because he can be quite effective in combat. So in this combat with the Chosen and the Birdmen, Baz takes off 2, but then we realised I didn't do the -1 to hit for being close to battle line or whatever the rule is, so I just said, just pop them back on, as it was my mistake. So my Legionnaires in the bottom of the picture finish off that last battle line squad and then consolidate into the vehicle again just to stop that moving around, stop it scoring, doing secondaries. So in the rest of the combat I managed to wipe out Baz's battle line squad with the accursed, who do not pile in as they do not want to pile into Cal just to give him a free swing at me, and I also take out that walker at the top which gives me bring it down. So bring it down, score a big 6, and I feel fairly confident that I've got defend stronghold, which will be scored at the end of Baz's turn. So with 10 for the primary, it puts it a little bit closer at 45-37, and now this is where the big swing, the big comeback, the big bit of luck or misfortune comes into play and actually changes the game for me because I've been chasing the game are in a fair whole time. Quite awkward. So place Baz actually drills a sabotage locus fairly easy. So establish locus he doesn't want because it's going to be difficult to do it, and he doesn't really want to be using units to establish a locus for 2 points in the middle, so he discards that and he gets sabotage. So bring it down. He thinks he's got to try and take out one of those rhinos, which could be doable. So after some thought, Baz starts to move units up. Cal moves on to that objective to try and out-OC my dudes on there and take control of it. He only scores, he scores 10 on taking hold. This round he controlled 2 objectives. He moved up those walkers to try and take out one of those rhinos. His cataphractic breachers moved up and his flying dudes fell back but stayed onto the objective. So Baz also moved up his little flying dudes to do containment in that building. I believe he moved them up first there, and then we realised that they could have done containment, so they might not be positioned perfectly. He also moved his vehicle up to here and then started to do some shooting. So a lot of important stuff happens in this combat fight phase. So before that, Baz manages to kill those regular cultists with some shooting. He then shoots into my cursed cultists, which means that they can surge move and means that they get into combat with the walker, which means they can't be shot. Baz then does his charges. He charges the walkers into my lone legionnaire rather than going for the rhino, which is a bit of a long bomb charge, and then Cal into my accursed cultists. So during the combat, the legionnaire, lone legionnaire obviously dies. Cal does a fair amount of damage to the accursed cultist, who then hit back and do a little bit of damage to the vehicle. And then not much happens in the combat in the bottom right, but at the end of the fight phase I use my 1CP stratagem to move those legionnaires out onto that objective, which is big because that means that going into my turn 4 I score 15 on the primary because I hold 3 objectives. I also pull the objectives, no prisoners and sabotage. I score defend stronghold, so it's 55-40. Add on the 15 for the primary, it's getting much closer. If I'm able to score my objectives, then that will take me ahead. This is because Baz was unable to bring it down, and he's sabotaging with those flying dudes in that middle building. So sabotage I decided to do with that rhino in the bottom middle, because that building is actually outside of my deployment zone. I'm then moving up my curse. I'll just leave on that objective just to really hold on to that, because Baz doesn't really have anything that can contest them. And then I move my legionnaires, advance and charge them, because the plan is to take out the flying guys in order to deny Baz his sabotage, which will stop him scoring 6 points. I've also disembarked that last unit of legionnaires out of the rhino before I moved it up onto the objective there, so they are ready to charge onto that objective. This is the thing with this list that I've got. You feel like you've cleared the stuff, and then I've just got more units that just keep on coming wave after wave to keep scoring these secondary objectives and the primary objectives, even in the late game. So by this time we were rapidly running out of time, so we kind of sped through these last few turns. There was a little bit of shooting, not really very consequential. The main thing was the charge from the Chosen onto the flying guys who were doing sabotage up in the middle top of the board, and the charge I made on that bottom right objective. So the legionnaires made their charge there and managed to kill that flying squad, or at least out OC that squad. The Chosen managed to fly in there, and they managed to wipe out that flying squad, which was massive because it stopped Baz from scoring 6 points. You may notice I shuffled that rhino back in the bottom right there. That was accidental. That should still be on the objective, I believe. I think it was just because we were rushing and moving stuff around. We then start to talk about what's going to happen in the remainder of the combat. We decided that vehicles, I think, had like 1 or 2 wounds, would die, but Cal would not. Going into the final turn, it was 59-55. This was the first time in this game I had been leading. Really helped having those 15 points from taking hold last turn. So Baz scored 10 points for taking hold this turn. He then got rid of sabotage because obviously he wouldn't be able to score it now. He got secure no man's land and assassination. He managed to achieve both of these. Secure no man's land, he just took an objective off me, no problem, and then he managed to kill that unit of accursed cultists in the middle, which contained a character. I believe there's still some legionnaires in combat with that vehicle, and that's why it couldn't move up onto that objective. We then talked about the Baz's shooting would basically take out that squad of legionnaires on the bottom right objective, but the rhino's still there. The other 2 legionnaires are still there, so I still contain it, which means that final turn, round 5, I do not score my primary until the end of the turn, which is important. I then scored 6 for sabotage from the end of last turn, and I drew establish locus and secure no man's land, which again fairly easy. So I was able to move, I believe, Cypher coming in there, establishing locus and no man's land. I then scored 15 points for taking hold, which brought the scores 87, 75 and won me the game. So not only did Cypher help me massively with his +1 to the cost CP, 12-inch aura in the middle of the board, he also scored me single-handedly 10-12 points because he secured no man's land, he established locus, and he scored me extra 5 on the primary at the end of the game. So yeah, what a hero. So this game was really close but really enjoyable, and that set me up then for the final game. So in the final game I was against Necrons, and as we know, everyone dislikes Necrons, especially with the Satans. I was playing on table 2, and there was only 4 people left with a perfect win record. So 2 people were going to get 3 wins, and it would all come down to the points in that final game. So if you'd like to see that last game, the final game of the RTT, my Renegade Raiders, Chaos Space Marines, against the Necrons, then I'll have that video up shortly, and I hope to see you then.